18 years after brilliant black aerospace engineer Dr. Elijah Carter died in a suspicious crash, his daughter Janelle walks into Ether Dynamics seeking a mechanic job. When the company's revolutionary Skyhawk X prototype fails during an investor demonstration, arrogant CEO Preston Maddox publicly dares the grease monkey to fix it, expecting humiliation. Instead, Janelle's methodical repair stuns everyone, especially Preston, who doesn't realize he's just invited his greatest threat inside. As Janelle uncovers her father's stolen designs and the deadly corporate secrets behind his death, the outsider in worn overalls transforms into the whistleblower who will dismantle an empire built on stolen genius and bring long overdue justice to her father's legacy. Just before we get back to it, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. And if you're enjoying these stories, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow's special episode is one you definitely don't want to miss. The summer heat rippled across the tarmac as Janelle Carter approached the gleaming Ether Dynamics facility. Unlike the pristine glass and steel structure that housed some of the nation's most brilliant aerospace minds, Janelle arrived in well-worn overalls, her work boots scuffed from years of honest labor. Her calloused hands gripped a worn leather tool bag, her father's, as she pushed through the revolving doors into a world that wasn't built for people like her. The reception area buzzed with activity. Men in crisp white shirts and women in tailored blazers moved with purpose, their security badges swinging from lanyards as they hurried to important meetings. Janelle approached the front desk, where a receptionist with perfectly manicured nails looked up with a practiced smile that quickly faltered. "I'm here about the temp mechanic position," Janelle said, her voice steady despite the receptionist's skeptical once-over. 20 minutes and 3 security checkpoints later, Janelle stood at the entrance to Hangar 7, the crown jewel of Ether Dynamics testing facilities. Inside, the cavernous space housed the company's most ambitious project, the Skyhawk X, a next-generation jet that promised to revolutionize both military and civilian aviation. The moment she stepped through the doors, conversations quieted. Engineers turned, their expressions shifting from curiosity to dismissal in seconds. A tall man with graying temples snickered to his colleague, just loud enough for Janelle to hear. "Looks like someone took a wrong turn at the janitor's office." Janelle kept her eyes forward, her jaw set. She'd heard worse. At the center of the hangar, surrounded by a group of men in expensive suits, stood Preston Maddox. Even without the introduction, Janelle would have known he was in charge. Everything about him, from his perfectly tailored three-piece suit to his commanding stance, screamed power and privilege. His silver cufflinks caught the light as he gestured toward the sleek aircraft behind him. "Gentlemen, the Skyhawk X represents the future of American aerospace dominance," Preston announced to the VIP investors and military officials. Its proprietary combustion system delivers 30% more thrust, while consuming 20% less fuel than anything currently in service. As Preston continued his pitch, a young technician with a clipboard approached Janelle. "You must be the new hire," he said, extending his hand. "I'm Liam Rivas, Junior Systems Tech." "Janelle Carter," she replied, shaking his hand firmly. HR said, "You'd be starting today. They didn't mention you'd be walking into the middle of Preston's dog and pony show for the investors." Liam grimaced. "Bad timing." Before Janelle could respond, a commotion erupted near the aircraft. Warning lights flashed across a nearby console as technicians scrambled around the Skyhawk X's exposed engine housing. "What's happening?" one of the investors asked, stepping back nervously. "Just a minor calibration issue," Preston assured him, though the tightness in his voice betrayed his concern. The lead engineer, a stern-faced man with wire-rimmed glasses, called out, "Systems not responding to the restart sequence. Auxiliary." "Power failing." Preston's smile vanished as he hurried to the console. "Fix it," he hissed to the engineer. "Now." The investors exchanged worried glances as Preston attempted to salvage the situation with forced laughter. "Well, gentlemen, sometimes even the most advanced technology needs a little coaxing." Janelle watched the engineers work, her eyes narrowing as she studied the diagnostic readouts visible on the nearest monitor. She noticed a pattern in the power fluctuations that seemed familiar. That's an airflow choke in the auxiliary combustion system, she muttered under her breath. Liam glanced at her, surprised. What did you say? The fuel mixture is too rich at the intake, and there's back pressure in the tertiary valve, Janelle continued quietly. It's causing the system to stall before ignition can stabilize. Liam stared at her, his clipboard forgotten in his hands. How could you possibly know that from here? Janelle shrugged. The fluctuation pattern on the monitor. I've seen it before. The commotion continued as more engineers gathered around the jet, their voices growing more urgent. Preston's face had turned an alarming shade of red as he berated the team for their incompetence. This is exactly what we can't have happen today, he snapped. These people are here to invest millions. Something in Janelle shifted. Perhaps it was the familiar problem, or perhaps it was the dismissive way Preston spoke to his team. Before she could reconsider, she stepped forward. Excuse me, she said, her voice cutting through the chaos. I think I know what's wrong. The hangar fell, silent. Every head turned toward Janelle, standing there in her worn overalls amid the sea of white coats and suits. Preston stared at her, his expression a mixture of confusion and annoyance. And you are? Janelle Carter. I'm here about the mechanic. Position. A ripple of laughter spread through the group of engineers. Preston's mouth curved into a condescending smile. Well, Ms. Carter, I appreciate your enthusiasm, but this is hardly a matter for a garage mechanic. His eyes flicked dismissively over her clothes. We don't run a charity garage here. More laughter followed, louder this time. The military. Officials remained stone-faced, but several of the investors joined in the mockery. Janelle felt heat rise in her cheeks but kept her voice level. The airflow is choking at the auxiliary combustion chamber because the fuel mixture is too rich. The tertiary valve is experiencing back pressure, which is why your ignition sequence keeps failing. Preston's smile hardened. And you determined this from across the room, without access to our proprietary systems or specifications? I can see the diagnostic readouts from here, Janelle replied. The pattern is pretty clear. Preston glanced at the nearest investor, sharing a look of amusement. Well, gentlemen, it seems we've been wasting millions on engineering degrees when we could have simply hired— What was it you do again? I fix engines, Janelle said simply. Preston's smile widened as he saw an opportunity to deflect attention from the embarrassing malfunction. You know what? Since Ms. Carter is so confident, why don't we give her a chance to prove her theory? He turned to address the room, arms spread wide in theatrical invitation. If she fixes our multi-million-dollar prototype, I'll eat my degree. This earned him appreciative chuckles from the crowd. The lead engineer stepped forward, alarmed. Sir, with all due respect, we can't allow an unvetted civilian to— Oh, I'm not serious, Harland. Preston cut him off, though his eyes never left Janelle. She won't actually touch the aircraft. This is merely an object lesson in the difference between tinkering with car engines and pioneering aerospace technology. Janelle met his gaze steadily. So you're not actually offering me the chance to try? Something in her calm confidence made Preston's smile falter momentarily. He recovered quickly, but not before Janelle noticed the flash of uncertainty. By all means, Preston said, gesturing grandly toward the Skyhawk X. Harland, give our guest 5 minutes to embarrass herself, then get back to actual solutions. Harland Tate looked horrified, but didn't dare contradict his boss in front of the investors. He reluctantly stepped aside, making it clear with his expression that he expected disaster. As Janelle approached the aircraft, the crowd of engineers parted, many smirking in anticipation of her failure. She felt the weight of their judgment as she studied the exposed engine housing, her mind racing through possibilities. Liam appeared at her side, offering his clipboard. Here's the system schematic, he whispered. Thought it might help. Janelle gave him a grateful nod as she quickly absorbed the technical details. The Skyhawk's engine was a marvel of engineering, but beneath its innovative design lay principles as old as flight itself. I'll need tools, she said quietly. Liam hesitated, glancing toward Preston and Harland, then made his decision. He slipped away, and returned moments later with a small toolkit. "Thanks," Janelle murmured, selecting a specialized wrench. With confident movements that spoke of years of practice, Janelle began disassembling a key section of the engine housing. Her hands moved with precise grace, each motion deliberate and efficient. She worked methodically, occasionally referencing an obscure design principle that few present recognized, but none could dispute. The smirks gradually faded as engineers watched her work. Even Harlan's scowl softened into reluctant curiosity, as Janelle exposed the auxiliary combustion system and identified exactly what she had predicted: a misaligned tertiary valve causing improper fuel mixture and airflow choking. With quick, deft movements, she rewired a control panel using unconventional, but undeniably effective logic. The entire process took just under 4 minutes. "Try it now," she said, stepping back and wiping her hands on a rag Liam provided. Harlan looked to Preston, who gave a curt nod. The engineer initiated the restart sequence, his expression clearly communicating his expectation of failure. For 3 agonizing seconds, nothing happened. Then, with a soft whir that grew steadily into a confident hum, the Skyhawk X's engines came to life. Not just running, but running smoother than they had in previous tests. The diagnostic readouts confirmed what everyone could hear: optimal performance across all systems. The hangar fell into stunned silence. The investors and military officials exchanged impressed glances. Liam couldn't suppress a grin. Harlan's mouth hung slightly open in disbelief. And Preston? Preston looked as though he'd swallowed something extremely unpleasant. One of the investors broke the silence. "Well, I'd say that's worth a standing ovation, wouldn't you, Preston?" Backed into a corner, Preston managed a tight smile. "Indeed. Quite unexpected." An Air Force colonel stepped forward, studying Janelle with new interest. "Young lady, that was impressive work. Where did you learn to diagnose systems like that?" Before Janelle could answer, Preston smoothly inserted himself between them. "A fortunate guess, Colonel, but I do admire initiative." He turned to Janelle with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Perhaps we could use someone with your unique perspective. A trial run as a consultant, starting tomorrow." It wasn't a question. The investors appeared pleased by this display of magnanimity, unaware of the cold calculation behind Preston's eyes. Janelle recognized it for what it was. He couldn't fire her now without looking petty and losing face with potential investors, but he had no intention of making her stay comfortable. "I accept," Janelle said simply. As the investors swarmed Preston with renewed enthusiasm about the Skyhawk X project, Janelle quietly packed up her tools. Liam approached, still grinning. "That was incredible," he said. "I've never seen anyone shut them up like that." Janelle offered a small smile. "Just doing what I know." Hours later, after the investors had departed and the hangar had emptied of all but a skeleton crew, Janelle walked alone to the parking lot. Her clothes were stained with grease, her hands blackened despite multiple washings. The security guard barely glanced at her temporary badge as she exited. In the privacy of her car, Janelle finally allowed herself a moment of triumph. She pulled out a worn photograph from her wallet, a smiling black man in an engineer's coat standing beside a prototype jet engine. "One step closer, Daddy," she whispered, touching the faded image gently before starting her car and driving away into the night. The next morning, Janelle returned to Ether Dynamics with her father's tool bag and a quiet determination. Gone was the element of surprise. Today, she'd face the full brunt of a workplace that had already decided she didn't belong. The moment she stepped into the hangar, the atmosphere shifted. Conversations halted mid-sentence. Engineers who had witnessed yesterday's demonstration suddenly found their computer screens fascinating. A few junior techs offered tentative nods, but most simply pretended not to see her. Harlan Tate stood at the central workstation, surrounded by his inner circle of senior engineers. When he spotted Janelle, his face hardened. "Well, if it isn't Preston's new publicity stunt," he announced, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Come to perform more parlor tricks?" A few engineers laughed, though their amusement seemed forced. Janelle kept her expression neutral as she approached the workstation where Liam was busy inputting data. "Morning," she said quietly. Liam glanced up, relief evident in his face at the sight of a friendly presence. "Hey, glad you came back. I wasn't sure you would after yesterday." "It takes more than a few cold shoulders to scare me off," Janelle replied, setting down her bag. "Well, I've been assigned to get you set up. Preston's orders." Liam lowered his voice. "Though between us, I think he's hoping you'll get overwhelmed and quit by lunch." Janelle's lips curved in a small smile. "Then he's going to be disappointed." As Liam showed her to a workstation on the periphery of the main floor, far from the central action and tucked beside a supply closet, Janelle observed the social dynamics of the hangar. Harlan's group of older engineers clearly ran the technical side of things, their decades of experience earning them respect and deference from the younger staff. They were also, she noted, exclusively white men over 50. "That's the old guard," Liam explained, following her gaze. "They've been here since Ether was just a defense contractor startup. Most of them worked together at Lockheed or Boeing before Preston recruited them. And they don't like change," Janelle observed. Liam snorted. "That's putting it mildly. They barely tolerate the computer systems from this decade." After setting up her credentials and explaining the basic protocols, Liam hesitated. "Look, I should warn you. They think you're just here as a diversity hire, a PR puppet for Preston to parade in front of investors and the media. That's ironic, considering Preston was ready to humiliate me yesterday." "Preston plays all angles," Liam replied with a shrug. "If you fail, you're a joke. If you succeed, he takes credit for discovering you. Either way, he wins." "We'll see about that," Janelle said quietly. As the morning progressed, Janelle was assigned basic diagnostic tests. Work, far below the complexity of what she'd handled yesterday. She completed each task with methodical precision, refusing to give anyone ammunition against her competence. During a break, Liam approached with 2 coffee cups, offering one to Janelle. "Want to see something cool? If you're up for a little exploration." Curious, Janelle followed him through a labyrinth of corridors to a rarely used section of the facility. Liam swiped his badge at a dusty door marked Archive Storage B. "Nobody comes back here anymore," he explained as they entered a dimly lit room filled with filing cabinets and old computer terminals. They digitized most of the old designs years ago, but some things never made it into the system. Janelle ran her fingers along a cabinet drawer labeled Project Horizons, 2004-2007. Something about the date range made her heart beat faster. Liam moved to a corner where blueprint tubes were stacked haphazardly. "I found these while looking for parts catalogs last month. Check this out." He carefully unrolled a faded blueprint onto a dusty table. Janelle's breath caught. The schematic showed an experimental propulsion system with a distinctive intake. Design, one she recognized instantly. "This looks like..." she began, then stopped herself. "Like what?" Liam prompted. "Nothing. Just reminds me of something I saw once." Janelle studied the blueprint carefully, noting the design date, June 2006. Her father had been alive then. As they were leaving the archives, Janelle's mind raced with questions. The blueprint's design elements were eerily similar to sketches she'd seen in her father's workshop, sketches he'd worked on in the months before his death. Back at her workstation, Janelle was lost in thought when a memory surfaced. Herself, as a little girl, sitting on her father's lap as he explained a complex engine diagram. Dr. Elijah Carter, brilliant aerospace engineer and devoted father, had made even the most advanced concepts accessible to his curious daughter. "The secret is in the flow, Nell," he'd tell her, his voice warm with passion. "Air and fuel must dance together perfectly. Too much of either, and the music stops." The memory was interrupted by a commotion at the central console. A calibration. System was showing erratic readings. Engineers clustered around, discussing possible causes. Janelle approached cautiously, studying the readouts from a distance. Something seemed off about the fluctuation pattern. It wasn't consistent with normal system variants. Before she could mention her observation, Harlan's voice cut through the discussion. Carter, since you're so eager to show off, why don't you take a look? The challenge was clear. Succeed and be resented more, or fail and confirm their low expectations. Janelle stepped forward, aware of all eyes on her. She carefully reviewed the diagnostic data, immediately noticing that the calibration parameters had been altered from standard settings. The changes were subtle. Someone would have had to manually override the safety protocols to make them. The intake valve pressure is set too high, she said finally. If we try to run the system with these settings, we could blow the auxiliary compressor. Harlan frowned. Impossible. I checked those settings myself this morning. Then someone changed. Them since you checked, Janelle replied evenly, bringing up the system log. There, at 10:47 a.m., parameter adjustments outside normal range. The timestamp corresponded to when she'd been in the archives with Liam, when her workstation had been unattended. A tense silence fell over the group as the implications became clear. Someone had tampered with the system, and the blame would have fallen on Janelle when it failed. Harlan's expression shifted from skepticism to something unreadable. Without a word, he reset the parameters to their correct values. The system immediately stabilized. Lucky catch, he muttered, but his eyes narrowed suspiciously at his team. Later that afternoon, Preston summoned Janelle to his office, a glass-walled space overlooking the hangar floor. Unlike the cluttered workspaces below, Preston's domain was minimalist and immaculate, with a single model of the Skyhawk X displayed prominently on his desk. Ms. Carter. Preston greeted her with a corporate smile that never reached his eyes. I've been hearing interesting reports about your first. I hope they've been positive, Janelle replied neutrally. Preston leaned back in his chair, studying her. You know, in business, timing is everything. Knowing when to accelerate, when to brake, when to fix things. He paused meaningfully. And when to leave things broken. The threat was subtle but unmistakable. I'm just doing the job you hired me for, Mr. Maddox. Yes, well, remember that your role here is strictly consultative. You're here to observe and offer input when requested. His smile tightened, not to disrupt established procedures or question senior staff. As Janelle returned to her workstation, she felt eyes following her across the hangar floor. Word of the tampered calibration system had spread, and with it, divisions were forming. Some engineers viewed her with increased suspicion, others with grudging respect. She opened a maintenance panel to begin her afternoon assignment, and froze. Scratched into the metal interior, barely visible unless you were looking directly at, it was a message. The truth is buried in the blue jet. The handwriting was unmistakable, the same slanted script her father used in his notebooks. That evening, after most staff had departed, Janelle and Liam stayed behind to work on a system diagnostic that Harlan had urgently assigned just before leaving, a transparent attempt to saddle her with overtime. You don't have to stay, Janelle told Liam as they worked. This is obviously busy work meant to punish me. Liam shrugged. I don't mind. Besides, I'm learning more watching you work than I did in my first 6 months here. As they tested various system parameters, Janelle introduced a sequence that struck Liam as unusual. Wait, that's not standard protocol, he said, watching her input a complex algorithm. What are you doing? It's a system override technique, Janelle explained. Sometimes you need to bypass the standard checks to see what's really happening. Underneath, Liam stared at the code sequence. I've never seen this approach before. It's not in any of our manuals. That's because it's not Ether's technique. Janelle hesitated, then added quietly, My father taught it to me. Recognition dawned in Liam's eyes. Your father? Carter. Elijah Carter? The engineer who died in that prototype crash about 15 years ago? Janelle's hands stilled on the
keyboard. 18 years ago, but yes. I read about him in school. He was brilliant.
His papers on propulsion dynamics are still referenced in aerospace engineering programs. Liam's expression shifted to one of awe. That's why you know all this. You're his daughter. Janelle nodded slowly. I'd appreciate if you kept that to yourself. Of course. But why? That legacy could open doors here. If the board knew who you were, if they knew who I am, Janelle interrupted, her voice dropping to a whisper. They'd bury me like they did him. Liam's brow furrowed. What do you mean? The official report said it was a mechanical failure during a test flight. Janelle's eyes hardened. My father triple-checked every system before each test. He'd been warning the company about design flaws. For weeks, they ignored him, then blamed him when exactly what he predicted happened. And you think someone here was responsible? I know they were. Janelle closed the maintenance panel. And I'm going to prove it. The early morning silence of Ether Dynamics' archive room enveloped Janelle as she methodically compared blueprint after blueprint. She'd arrived 2 hours before her shift, using the temporary access badge Liam had programmed to give her entry to the restricted areas. The risk was worth it. Spread before her were 2 sets of designs, digitally archived copies of her father's prototypes from 18 years ago, and the current Skyhawk X schematics she'd downloaded from the company server. At first glance, they appeared entirely different nomenclature, different material specifications, even different design philosophies. But Janelle wasn't looking at the surface details. She was looking at the bones. There you are, she whispered, tracing her finger along a distinctive fuel delivery system in the Skyhawk X plans. The configuration was unique, a modified hexagonal flow pattern that optimized combustion while reducing heat signature. It was nearly identical to a design her father had created, albeit with updated materials and slightly altered dimensions. She pulled up another comparison. The auxiliary power routing. Again, beneath cosmetic changes and renamed components, the core innovation was unmistakable. Elijah Carter's work, repackaged and renamed. Janelle leaned back, her heart pounding. This wasn't coincidence or convergent design thinking. Someone had taken her father's revolutionary concepts he died testing, and built the company's flagship product on them without attribution. Her research continued at home that evening. Seated at her kitchen table with her laptop and a cold cup of coffee, Janelle dug through old news articles and industry publications. Most covered her father's death as a tragic accident, a brilliant engineer lost to a mechanical failure during a routine test flight. Few questioned the official narrative, but one small article from an industry newsletter caught her attention. It listed the personnel present during the fatal test flight, including interns and support staff. Near the bottom of the list, P. Maddox, engineering intern. Janelle stared at the name. Preston Maddox had been there when her father died. Not just at the company, at the actual test site. Further searching revealed that Preston had been a graduate student at MIT interning at Ether's predecessor company, Coleman Aerospace. His thesis project had focused on next-generation propulsion systems, the very technology her father had been developing. You were there, Janelle murmured, staring at a grainy photo of a much younger Preston standing in the background of a team picture. You saw what happened. The next day, Janelle arrived at work to find Liam in an unusually somber mood. When they were alone at the coffee station, he finally spoke. Preston called me into his office yesterday, he said quietly, checking to ensure no one was within earshot. Offered me a promotion to the integration team. That's great, Janelle said, though something in Liam's expression told her otherwise. There were conditions. Liam's voice dropped lower. He wanted me to keep an eye on you and report anything unusual about your work or your access to the systems. Janelle's face remained neutral, though her grip tightened on her coffee cup. What did you tell him? I said I'd think about it. Liam met her eyes. Then I went home and recorded everything he said. I've got it all, the offer, the conditions, even him implying that your ideas shouldn't make it into the official documentation. Before Janelle could respond, the hangar doors opened, and an elderly man entered. Tall and thin with a shock of white hair, he carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone who had nothing left to prove. Harland immediately approached him, offering a rare, genuine smile. Delaney, what brings you out of retirement? Just checking on my legacy, the older man replied, his eyes sweeping the hangar until they landed on Janelle. For a brief moment, something like recognition flickered across his face. That's Delaney Shaw. Liam whispered to Janelle. One of the original founders before Preston bought controlling interest. He retired about 5 years ago, but they still bring him in as a consultant sometimes. Throughout the morning, Janelle felt Delaney's eyes on her as she worked. When she finally took her lunch break, she found him waiting by the exit. "You're Elijah's girl," he said without preamble. Not a question, a statement of fact. Janelle hesitated, then nodded once. "Thought so. You have his eyes. And his hands. The way you handle the components. Deliberate, like you're having a conversation with the machine." Delaney's weathered face softened. "He was the best engineer I ever worked with. You knew my father well?" "We worked together for 6 years. Delaney glanced around, then gestured toward the exit. "Walk with me." Outside in the sunshine of the employee courtyard, Delaney spoke more freely. "I was on site the day of the accident. Not in the control room, I was at the fabrication lab. But I heard the explosion." His eyes grew distant. "By the time I got there, the emergency crews were already pulling him out of the wreckage." Janelle had heard the story before, but never from someone who had witnessed it. The official report said mechanical failure, fuel line rupture. Delaney's expression hardened. "That's what the report said. But you don't believe it." The old engineer studied her carefully before answering. "Your father came to me 2 days before the test. He had concerns about modifications that had been made to his design, modifications he hadn't approved." "What kind of modifications?" "They'd removed a safety override system he'd designed, said it was redundant, added unnecessary weight." Delaney shook his head. "Elijah fought them on it, but he was overruled by management." Janelle felt cold despite the warm sun. "Who ordered the modification?" "That's the thing. The order came through official channels, but no one would claim responsibility afterward. Everyone involved either left the company or suddenly couldn't remember the details." Delaney leaned closer. "Walk away, Janelle. Before they do to you what they did to your father." As the old engineer turned to leave, Janelle called after him. "Why are you telling me this now?" Delaney paused. "Because I was a coward 18 years ago. I knew something wasn't right, but I kept quiet to protect my job, my reputation." His eyes met hers. "I've regretted it every day since." That evening, as a summer storm rolled in across the airfield, Janelle found herself alone in the parking lot, or so she thought, until a sleek black Audi pulled up alongside her. The window rolled down to reveal Preston Maddox, his usual polished facade slightly undone by the late hour. "Ms. Carter," he called out. "A word before you leave?" Rain began to fall as Janelle approached the car, her posture guarded. Preston studied her through the open window. "I understand Delaney Shaw introduced himself today. Quite the coincidence." "Is it?" "He's become somewhat unreliable in his old age, prone to conspiracy theories and revisionist history." Preston's smile was cold. "I wouldn't put much stock in his stories." "I don't recall mentioning any stories." Something flickered in Preston's eyes, a calculation being made. "Let's drop the pretense, shall we? I know who you are, Janelle Carter. I knew the moment HR forwarded your application." The rain intensified, soaking through Janelle's jacket, but she stood her ground. "Then you know why I'm here. I assumed it was for employment, but perhaps your motives run deeper." Preston leaned forward. "You think you're the first to dig up bones? Your father didn't know when to quit either." The threat hung in the air between them, barely audible over the drumming of rain on the car roof. "Is that what happened?" Janelle asked, her voice steady despite the chill spreading through her body. "He wouldn't quit, so you made him?" Preston's laugh held no humor. "Such drama. Your father died in a tragic accident. An accident caused by his own stubbornness and refusal to adapt to practical realities." "You mean his refusal to compromise safety for profit?" "I mean his refusal to be a team player." Preston's expression hardened. A quality his daughter seems to have inherited. With that, he rolled up his window and drove away, leaving Janelle standing alone in the rain, her suspicions now certainties. The next day, during a routine maintenance check of the Skyhawk X, Janelle discovered something unexpected. Hidden inside the maintenance hatch, partially concealed behind a bundle of wiring, was a small, non-standard module with a damaged memory drive. She carefully photographed it in place before removing it, noting that it hadn't been included in any of the official schematics. The casing was older than the surrounding components, its design reminiscent of technology from nearly 2 decades ago. "What did you hide?" she whispered, running her fingers along the scratched surface. That evening, Janelle, Liam, and Sahana Patel, a junior engineer who had recently begun sharing knowing looks with them whenever Harland or Preston made dismissive comments, gathered in Janelle's apartment to examine the mysterious module. "It's definitely not standard ether equipment," Sahana confirmed, examining the circuit board. "The architecture is completely different, and look at the manufacturing date, 2007. "The year my father died," Janelle said quietly. Liam connected the damaged drive to his laptop. "Most of the data is corrupted, but I might be able to recover fragments." Hours of careful work yielded only encrypted file fragments, most too damaged to decode. But just before midnight, Liam's decryption program finally broke through. "I've got something," he announced, his voice tight with excitement. The recovered file was an audio recording, badly degraded but partially audible. When they played it, Janelle's heart stopped at the sound of her father's voice, distorted but unmistakable. "If this module is active, I didn't make it. They're using Skyhawk to bury what we built, what we died for." The recording ended, in static, leaving them in stunned silence. "He knew," Janelle whispered. "He knew they would do this." "But what does he mean by what we died for?" Sahana asked. "He recorded this before the accident." "I don't know," Janelle admitted. "But this proves the Skyhawk project isn't what Preston claims it is. My father embedded this message for someone to find." "And now we've found it," Liam said, his expression grim. "The question is, what do we do next?" The answer came sooner than expected. The following day, Preston called an emergency board meeting to discuss security concerns. Janelle wasn't invited, but Liam managed to access the meeting minutes afterward. The language was carefully corporate, but the intent was clear. Preston had convinced the board that Janelle's unconventional methods posed potential risks to proprietary technology. Her access to systems was to be restricted, and her work closely monitored. "He's trying to box you in," Liam explained as they reviewed the document. "Make it impossible for you to find anything else without triggering security protocols." "Then we need to work faster," Janelle replied, her determination only strengthening. "Before he buries the truth completely." Gray clouds hung low over the airfield as the Skyhawk X prepared for its scheduled test flight. In the control room, engineers monitored systems, while Preston entertained a group of Defense Department officials who had come to observe the demonstration. Janelle stood at the EGAT back of the room, officially there to consult but effectively sidelined by Preston's new restrictions. She watched the test pilot, Rick Donovan, run through his pre-flight checks with practiced efficiency. "All systems nominal," Rick reported over the comm. "Ready for engine start sequence." Harland, at the lead console, gave the go-ahead. "Cleared. For startup, proceed with test protocol Alpha 7. As the engines powered up, Janelle's eyes remained fixed on a specific readout, the auxiliary power system she had modified days earlier. Without authorization, she had installed a manual override that bypassed the automated controls. If anything went wrong with the main system, the pilot could activate it directly. The Skyhawk X taxied smoothly to the runway, its sleek form gleaming, despite the overcast day. Preston's voice carried across the control room as he boasted to the officials about the aircraft's capabilities. "This will revolutionize tactical air support," he proclaimed. "Faster response time, higher ceiling, longer range, all with a reduced infrared signature that makes it nearly invisible to current detection systems." The jet accelerated down the runway and lifted gracefully into the air. For the first 8 minutes, everything proceeded according to plan. The Skyhawk X executed a series of maneuvers that demonstrated its agility and responsiveness. Then, at 12,000 feet, something changed. "I'm getting fluctuations in the main power grid," Rick reported, his voice professional but tense. Significant. Drop-in thrust. Harland leaned forward, suddenly alert. Readings confirm power degradation. Switch to backup systems. Backup systems not responding, Rick replied. Primary controls becoming sluggish. The atmosphere in the control room shifted instantly from confident demonstration to crisis management. Engineers scrambled to diagnose the problem as the aircraft began losing altitude. "What's happening?" one of the officials demanded. Preston's smile had vanished. "Just a minor anomaly. Our systems have redundancies. Main engine failing." Rick's voice cut through the room. Attempting restart sequence. Janelle pushed her way to the front, ignoring protests from security. "Rick, listen to me. There's a manual override panel under the right console. Black switch with a red guard." Preston whirled to face her. "What are you talking about? There's no such—" "I see it," Rick confirmed, activating now. For 3 terrifying seconds, nothing happened. Then the readout stabilized as auxiliary power rerouted through Janelle's modified system. "I have control again," Rick reported, relief evident in his voice. "Systems stabilizing, returning to base." The control room erupted in confused activity, relief mixed with urgent questions about what had just happened. But Janelle's focus remained on Preston, whose face had drained of color. "You installed an unauthorized system on my aircraft?" hissed, grabbing her arm and pulling her away from the others. "I installed a safety measure," Janelle corrected him, pulling free from his grip. "One that just saved your test pilot and your multi-million-dollar prototype. This is sabotage. Industrial espionage." "No," Janelle countered, her voice rising despite herself. "Sabotage is what happened to that engine. Someone deliberately compromised the power routing system, the exact same way my father's prototype was compromised 18 years ago." Preston's eyes narrowed. "You have no proof of that." "I will," Janelle promised. "And when I do, everyone will know what really happened to Dr. Elijah Carter." After the Skyhawk X landed safely and the crisis management team took over, Preston quickly moved to control the narrative. At an emergency briefing, he described the incident as a routine error that demonstrated the aircraft's exceptional fail-safe capabilities. "There will be no formal investigation," he announced to the gathered engineers. "Our internal team will review the telemetry data and make necessary adjustments before the next test flight." Janelle stood to object, but Preston cut her off. "Ms. Carter's consulting contract is suspended pending a security review. Security will escort her from the premises immediately." As security approached, Liam stepped forward. "Sir, with all due respect, Janelle's override saved the aircraft. We should at least—" "That will be all, Mr. Rivas," Preston interrupted coldly. "Unless you'd like your employment status reviewed as well." That evening, Janelle's phone rang with an unknown number. When she answered, a man's voice spoke quietly. "It's Rick Donovan, the test pilot. How did you get my number?" "Liam gave it to me. I had to call. Whatever you did to that aircraft saved my life today." Rick paused, "But they told me to keep my mouth shut about the manual override. Said it was a confidential system enhancement that shouldn't be discussed." "They're covering it up," Janelle said, unsurprised. "Just like they always do. Look, I don't know what's going on between you and management, but I've flown enough experimental aircraft to know the difference between a routine error and sabotage." Rick's voice hardened. Someone wanted that flight to fail. After the call ended, Janelle sat in her darkened apartment, turning the damaged memory module over in her hands. The partial message from her father played on repeat in her mind. "They're using Skyhawk to bury what we built." Her suspension might have locked her out of ether dynamics, but it hadn't diminished her resolve. If anything, the near crash had only confirmed her suspicions. The next morning, she called Liam and Sahana. "We need to build it," she told them when they arrived at her apartment. "My father's original design, the one they corrupted." "Build it?" Sahana looked skeptical. "How? We don't have access to the facilities or materials. We don't need state-of-the-art equipment," Janelle explained, spreading out her father's notebooks on the kitchen table. just enough to prove the concept works, and more importantly, that it works safely, without the flaws they introduced. Liam studied the designs. We could use the old workshop in the disused wing, the one near the archives. Nobody goes there anymore. It's risky, Sahana warned. If we get caught... It's riskier to do nothing, Janelle replied. The Skyhawk X will fly again, and next time, my override might not save it. Over the next 2 weeks, working after hours and on weekends, they pieced together a small-scale version of Elijah Carter's original propulsion system. Liam borrowed components from storage, while Sahana reprogrammed outdated testing equipment to monitor their prototype. Meanwhile, despite her suspension, Janelle continued her investigation. She compiled evidence of design similarities between her father's work and the current Skyhawk, documented the safety overrides that had been removed, and created a timeline connecting Preston's rise at the company with the acquisition of Elijah's intellectual property. Their clandestine work was progressing well until one evening when Liam arrived at the workshop to find Harlan Tate attempting to access Janelle's workstation. "What are you doing here?" Liam demanded, blocking the older engineer's path. Harlan jumped, clearly not expecting anyone else to be there. "I could ask you the same question. This area is restricted. So is someone else's workstation," Liam countered. "What are you looking for?" For a moment it seemed Harlan might bluster his way out, but then his shoulders sagged. "Preston sent me. He wants to know what Carter found, what evidence she has." "Evidence of what?" Harlan's expression turned bitter. "You know exactly what. The stolen designs, the safety protocols that were removed, all of it. If you know about that, why are you helping him cover it up?" Liam asked, genuinely confused. "Because 18 years ago, I signed off on those removed safety measures," Harlan admitted, his voice hollow. "Preston convinced me they were redundant, unnecessary weight. When the prototype crashed and Elijah died, I realized what I'd done. But by then it was too late." "So you've been covering for Preston all these years?" "He has evidence of my negligence. If the truth comes out about Carter's death, I'll face criminal charges." Harlan's eyes met Liam's. "I have grandchildren, Rivas, a reputation. I can't go to prison at my age." The following day, the Ether Dynamics board convened again. Preston pushed for Janelle's immediate termination and a complete security lockdown on the Skyhawk project. "She's unstable, fixated on conspiracy theories about her father's accident," Preston argued. "She's installed unauthorized modifications to our prototype and accessed restricted archives." The vote seemed headed in Preston's favor until Liam entered the boardroom unannounced, carrying a thumb drive. "Before you vote," he said, addressing the board directly, "you should hear this." He played the audio recording he'd made weeks earlier, Preston offering him a promotion in exchange for spying on Janelle, admitting knowledge of her father's designs, and instructing Liam to ensure certain documentation disappeared from the system. The boardroom fell silent as the recording ended. Preston's face had turned an alarming shade of red. "This is taken completely out of context," he sputtered. "It's been edited, manipulated." "The full recording is available for forensic analysis," Liam replied calmly, "along with timestamps and metadata." The board chair, a stern woman in her 60s, removed her glasses. "I believe we need to reconsider this vote and perhaps open a more thorough investigation into these allegations." The vote to terminate Janelle failed. Instead, the board authorized an internal review of the Skyhawk project's development history and the circumstances surrounding Dr. Elijah Carter's death. Preston stormed from the boardroom, but his victory was short-lived. That evening, as Janelle visited her mother's grave with fresh flowers, she finally allowed herself to break down. "I wanted to be just like him, Mom," she whispered, tracing the adjacent headstone that marked her father's resting place. "I dreamed of being a fighter pilot, designing planes that would change the world. But after he died, I couldn't bear to even look at an aircraft." She wiped away tears. "But now I'm finishing what he started. I'm making it right." Unknown to Janelle, at that very moment, Sahana was making a breakthrough. The memory drive they'd found in the Skyhawk X had finally yielded its secrets after weeks of painstaking data recovery. When Janelle returned to her apartment, Liam and Sahana were waiting, their expressions a mixture of triumph and grim satisfaction. "We got it all," Sahana announced, her voice trembling with excitement. "Your father's complete designs, his test logs, and—" She paused. "A safety override system he documented before being ordered to remove it. The same override that would have prevented his crash," Liam added quietly. Janelle stared at the screen, at her father's meticulous notes, and the damning evidence they contained. After 18 years, the truth was finally in her hands. "What do we do now?" Sahana asked. Janelle's phone lit up with a notification. She'd been following a tech journalist on social media for weeks, observing his coverage of aerospace innovation and corporate ethics. Now she had a story for him. "Now," she said, her finger hovering over the contact button. "We make sure everyone knows what happened." She pressed send on a message that would change everything. "I have evidence of stolen designs and unsafe engineering practices at Ether Dynamics that led to a fatal crash 18 years ago. Are you interested?" The response came almost immediately. "Very. When can we talk?" The morning sun had barely crested the horizon when Janelle's phone began buzzing incessantly. Overnight, the tech world had exploded with the news. The article, "Stolen. Legacy. How Ether Dynamics Built an Empire on a Dead Man's Genius," had gone live at midnight and was already trending across every major platform. Janelle sat at her kitchen table, coffee growing cold as she scrolled through the reactions. The journalist Marcus Webb had done a masterful job of presenting the evidence. Side-by-side comparisons of Elijah's designs with the Skyhawk X, testimonials from anonymous engineers, and a timeline connecting Preston's rise with the acquisition of Elijah's work. Her phone rang again. "Liam." "Have you seen it?" he asked without preamble. "I'm looking at it now," Janelle replied, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside her. "It's more than I expected. It's everywhere. The stock is already down 15% in pre-market. Trading," Liam paused. "And there are protesters gathering outside Ether headquarters." Janelle moved to her window and looked down at the street. A news van had parked across from her apartment building. "They're here too." "Are you ready for this? Once you step outside, everything changes." Janelle thought about the 18 years of silence, of questions without answers, of a brilliant legacy buried by corporate greed. "I've been ready since the day he died." Mid-morning, the story had reached mainstream news outlets. Video footage showed dozens of protesters outside Ether Dynamics, holding signs demanding accountability and justice for Dr. Elijah Carter. Social media was flooded with hashtags. "Justice for Elijah" and "Dar's Ether Lies" were trending nationally. Preston's response came swiftly and ruthlessly. A press release from Ether Dynamics categorically denied all allegations, describing them as the vindictive fabrications of a disgruntled temporary employee with a personal vendetta. The company announced it was pursuing legal action against both Janelle and the publication for defamation. More damaging was the coordinated character assassination that followed. Suddenly, fabricated records of prior misconduct appeared online. Allegations that Janelle had been fired from previous jobs for incompetence, that she had a history of making false claims against employers, even suggestions that she was mentally unstable, obsessed with conspiracy theories about her father's death. "They're trying to destroy your credibility," Sahana said as they gathered in Liam's apartment, which had become their makeshift headquarters since Janelle's building was surrounded by reporters. "It was expected," Janelle replied, her calm exterior masking the hurt she felt at seeing her character so publicly maligned. "Preston has too much to lose. He'll try everything." "The good news," Liam interjected, "is that people aren't buying it. The technical evidence is too strong, and your father's reputation in the engineering community was impeccable." Later that afternoon, Janelle received an unexpected call from Marcus Webb. "The story's blowing up bigger than anything I've covered before," he told her. "Tech Insight wants to do a live interview segment with you tonight. Are you willing?" Despite Her private nature, Janelle understood the importance of controlling the narrative. "Yes," she said. "I'll do it." The interview, conducted via video link from Liam's apartment, was a turning point. Facing the skeptical questions of the host, Janelle displayed a quiet confidence and technical knowledge that impressed viewers. She didn't rant or accuse. She simply presented facts, calmly refuting the personal attacks against her while redirecting attention to her father's legacy and the evidence contained in the data drive. "This isn't about revenge," she explained, her voice steady. "It's about truth and accountability. My father dedicated his life to creating safer, more efficient aircraft. The technology he developed could have saved lives and advanced aerospace engineering by decades. Instead, it was stolen, stripped of critical safety features and used to build corporate profits." When the host pressed her on whether she had evidence connecting Preston directly to her father's death, Janelle was carefully precise. "What we have is proof that safety overrides designed by my father were deliberately removed before his fatal test flight, the same overrides that would have prevented the crash. We have documentation showing Preston Maddox was present during that test and later incorporated my father's designs into projects he claimed as his own innovations. The evidence speaks for itself." By the end of the interview, the tide of public opinion had shifted decisively in Janelle's favor. Her intelligence, integrity, and measured responses had won over skeptics and strengthened her supporters. Back at Ether Dynamics, the internal culture was fracturing. Junior engineers who had witnessed Janelle's expertise firsthand began questioning the official company line. Whispers in break rooms and encrypted messages exchanged after hours snowballed into a quiet rebellion. Anonymous tips began arriving in Janelle's email, more buried designs, documentation of hidden test failures, even security camera footage, showing Harland accessing her workstation the night before the Skyhawk's near crash. "The dam is breaking," Liam said as they sorted through the flood of new evidence. "People are scared of being on the wrong side of this when the dust settles." The most significant breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Late one night, as Janelle was reviewing technical documentation, Liam burst into the apartment, his face flushed with excitement. "I found it," he announced, setting his laptop on the table. "The black box log from your father's crash." Janelle stared at him, hardly daring to hope. "That's impossible. The company claimed it was destroyed in the fire. They lied." Liam opened a file showing a corrupted but partially readable log. "I've been systematically accessing archived drives from that era, and I found this buried in a backup system that was decommissioned years ago. It's damaged, but there's enough data to analyze the flight parameters before the crash." They spent hours poring over the fragmented data, piecing together the final moments of Elijah Carter's life. The log showed exactly what Delaney had suggested. The prototype had suffered a catastrophic failure in exactly the system where the safety override had been removed. "This proves it wasn't mechanical failure or pilot error," Janelle whispered, her finger tracing the waveform that represented her father's final moments. "The system failed exactly as he predicted it would." The next day, Janelle received a text from an encrypted number. "Not all security contractors stay loyal when they discover they've been protecting criminals. Northern Plaza Garage, Level 3, midnight." Despite Liam and Sahana's concerns about the mysterious message, Janelle was determined to meet this potential whistleblower. "If there's even a chance they have information about my father, I have to go." The parking garage was dimly lit and eerily quiet as Janelle arrived just before midnight. She'd taken precautions. Liam was parked nearby with a clear view of the entrance, and Sahana was monitoring a live stream from Janelle's phone, hidden in her pocket. At precisely midnight, footsteps echoed through the concrete structure. A woman emerged from the shadows, tall, athletic, with close-cropped gray hair and the hyper-vigilant bearing of someone accustomed to assessing threats. "Janelle Carter," the woman stated, rather than asked. "I'm Catherine Reeves. I was head of internal security at Coleman Aerospace during the time of your father's death." "You were there?" Janelle asked, her heart racing. "I was responsible for securing the test site that day." Catherine's expression remained neutral, but her eyes held regret. What I'm about to give you could result in criminal charges against me for violating multiple NDAs, but some things matter more than legal agreements. She handed Janelle a USB drive. These are internal memos from 18 years ago that were supposed to be destroyed during the merger with Ether. Emails showing Preston Maddox specifically pressured the test coordinator to proceed, despite your father's safety concerns. Janelle stared at the small device in her palm. Why now? Why not come forward years ago? Fear. Career preservation. Shame. Catherine looked away. All the usual cowardly reasons, but watching history repeat itself with the Skyhawk X, I couldn't stay silent anymore. As Catherine turned to leave, Janelle called after her. Will you testify if it comes to that? The poor, former security chief paused. If it means justice for Elijah Carter, yes. While Janelle was securing this critical evidence, Preston was making his own desperate moves. He called an emergency board meeting and proposed a complete corporate restructuring, selling off the Skyhawk division to a foreign subsidiary, erasing connections between current projects and past designs, and pivoting the company toward new technologies. This is our only option to contain the PR damage and protect shareholder value, Preston argued to the assembled board members. We sever the infected limb to save the body. What Preston didn't know was that the meeting was being live-streamed to investors, a transparency measure hastily implemented by concerned board members. As the vote to approve his restructuring plan approached, the boardroom doors burst open. Liam entered first, followed by Janelle and Sahana. Behind them came Marcus Webb and a camera operator. Before you vote, Janelle announced to the stunned board, there's evidence you need to see. Despite Preston's furious objections, the board chair allowed Janelle to proceed. On the large presentation screen, they displayed the black box log, the security officer's emails, and testimony from 3 engineers who had worked with Elijah and witnessed Preston's actions. The evidence was damning and irrefutable. As investors watching the live stream began flooding the company with calls, the board meeting dissolved into chaos. Preston shouted accusations of corporate espionage and threatened lawsuits against everyone present. But his words fell on deaf ears. The shareholders had seen enough. The restructuring vote was unanimously rejected, and a motion to suspend Preston pending a full investigation passed with only one dissenting vote, his own. The weeks following Preston's suspension were a whirlwind of activity at Ether Dynamics. The board appointed an interim CEO, Dr. Cynthia Morrow, a former Air Force colonel with a PhD in aerospace engineering and a reputation for uncompromising integrity. Unknown to most, she had been a contemporary of Elijah Carter's in graduate school. Janelle was reinstated with a formal apology and given unrestricted access to company archives to continue her investigation. The atmosphere in the hangar had transformed. Engineers who had once sneered at her now sought her input, and Harland, Tate's inner circle, had dissolved as each member scrambled to distance themselves from the growing scandal. On her first day back, Janelle found a handwritten note on her workstation. My office, 2 p.m. C. Morrow. Dr. Morrow's office was Spartan, compared to Preston's elaborate space. Instead of modern art and status symbols, her walls displayed aerospace schematics, technical awards, and a framed photo of a young Cynthia with a group of engineers, including Elijah Carter. Your father was brilliant, Morrow said without preamble, as Janelle entered. Too brilliant for some to handle. I left the private sector because I couldn't stomach watching mediocre men take credit for exceptional work, particularly from those they deemed outsiders. She pushed a file across her desk. I've authorized full access to your father's complete design archives. Everything Ether acquired from Coleman Aerospace, including projects that were buried because they were too advanced for the technology of the time. Janelle opened the file with trembling hands. Inside were blueprints she'd never seen, concepts her father had developed but never had the chance to build. Among them was a revolutionary hybrid propulsion system that appeared decades ahead of its time. This could change everything, Janelle whispered, tracing the elegant design. That's what your father believed, Morrow replied, and what Preston feared. As the investigation progressed, The pressure on Harlan Tate intensified. Caught between loyalty to Preston and the weight of his own conscience, he finally broke. In a sworn statement to the board, he admitted that Preston had ordered Elijah's override system removed to push an untested feature for an upcoming investor demonstration, the same feature that failed mid-flight. Preston said the override would mask the performance capabilities, Harlan confessed, his voice hollow with regret. He said Elijah was being overprotective, that the system would perform better without the training wheels, as he called them. When the crash happened, Preston was the first to suggest pilot error. He had documentation ready, showing Elijah had been working excessive hours, implying fatigue might have affected his judgment. The confession sent shockwaves through the company and the industry. Investigations by both the FAA and the Justice Department were opened, and Preston's assets were frozen pending criminal inquiries. For Janelle, the vindication was bittersweet. Justice for her father was finally within reach, but the cost had been 18 years of his absence, of potential unfulfilled, of a daughter growing up without her father's guidance. The strain of the fight began to show in unexpected ways. Late one evening, as Janelle and Liam worked on reconstructing one of Elijah's designs, tensions that had been building finally surfaced. "You need to take a step back," Liam urged after Janelle had worked through her third consecutive night. "We've won. Preston is finished. The truth is out." "It's not enough," Janelle insisted, her eyes red-rimmed from exhaustion. "We need to rebuild every design, prove every concept, make sure his full legacy is restored." "At what cost?" Liam demanded. "You're driving yourself into the ground. When does it end? When is it enough?" Janelle slammed down her tools. "It ends when justice is done. When my father's name is cleared completely and his work recognized." "This isn't just about justice anymore," Liam argued, his voice softening. "It's becoming an obsession. We've exposed the truth. Your father would want you to live your life now, not sacrifice it to his memory." "Don't tell me what my father would want," Janelle snapped, tears threatening. "You didn't know him." "No, but I know you," Liam replied gently. "And I'm worried you're chasing ghosts instead of building your own future." The argument left a rift between them, not hostility, but a fundamental difference in perspective that neither could easily bridge. The following day, Sahana made a discovery that reignited Janelle's determination. Buried in company flight logs was evidence of a confidential test flight scheduled 1 week after Elijah's death. A flight using an aircraft with specifications eerily similar to Elijah's final design. "They didn't even wait for his body to be buried," Sahana said, her voice tight with anger. "They took his work and immediately repackaged it under a different name." That evening, returning to her workshop after hours, Janelle found the door ajar. Inside, drawers had been pulled open, files scattered across the floor. Her father's notebook, the one containing his personal notes and observations, was missing. Security footage revealed a masked figure bypassing the electronic locks with an administrative override code. The intruder's build and movement suggested someone familiar with the facility's layout, but their identity remained concealed. "It has to be Preston," Liam insisted when Janelle called him, "or someone working for him." "Whoever it is, they're desperate," Janelle replied, "which means we're getting closer to something they don't want found." The break-in left Janelle feeling violated and vulnerable. The next day, needing space to clear her head, she drove to the remote airfield where her father's prototype had crashed 18 years earlier. Now abandoned, the runway was cracked and overgrown, nature slowly reclaiming the site of tragedy. Standing where her father had died, Janelle finally allowed herself to grieve, not just for the brilliant engineer lost too soon, but for the father, who had missed seeing his daughter grow up, who would never know the woman she'd become. "I'm sorry, Dad," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I tried to bring you justice, but it's not enough. They're still hiding something, still one step ahead." As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the abandoned airfield, Janelle wiped her tears and straightened her shoulders. "I'm not done yet," she promised the fading light. "Whatever they're hiding, I'll find it." Her renewed determination was matched by unexpected public support the following day. Rick Donovan, the test pilot who had nearly crashed in the Skyhawk X, appeared on a national morning news program. I was told to keep quiet about what happened during that test flight, he stated firmly into the camera. Preston Maddox personally threatened to blacklist me from the industry if I spoke about the override system that saved my life, a system installed by Janelle Carter without authorization because she knew the aircraft was unsafe. Rick looked directly into the camera. I've been flying experimental aircraft for 15 years. What happened that day wasn't a routine error. It was a catastrophic system failure, identical to the one described in Dr. Carter's final flight warnings 18 years ago. I'm breaking my NDA because the next pilot might not be as lucky as I was. The interview sent shockwaves through the aerospace community. Other test pilots came forward with similar stories of pressure to downplay safety concerns. Engineers from competing companies expressed outrage at the suppression of potentially life-saving technology. Public protests outside Ether headquarters grew larger and more vocal. Preston's name trended globally, for all the wrong reasons. Whistleblower protections became the rallying cry of employees across the industry. Inside Ether Dynamics, Dr. Morrow called an all-hands meeting to address the growing crisis. Effective immediately, we are establishing a corporate ethics committee with full investigative powers, she announced to the assembled staff. Any engineer who felt pressured to compromise safety standards under previous leadership is encouraged to come forward without fear of reprisal. The announcement was met with thunderous applause. Years of pent-up frustration and fear were finally breaking free. As Janelle left the meeting, she received an urgent text from Liam. Preston's house is empty. Security system deactivated. Private plane gone from hangar. Preston Maddox had fled. Within hours, rumors spread through financial circles that Preston had liquidated millions in cryptocurrency holdings. His private jet had filed a flight plan for Singapore, a country with limited extradition agreements with the United States. He's running, Sahana said as they gathered in Janelle's newly secured workshop. He knows what's coming. Let him run, Janelle replied, a new calmness in her voice. The truth doesn't need him to be present to come out. That evening, as news of Preston's apparent flight from justice dominated headlines, Janelle received an unexpected visitor. Delaney Shaw stood at her door looking older and more frail than when she'd last seen him. May I come in? He asked quietly. Once seated, Delaney placed a worn leather notebook on her coffee table. Her father's missing notebook. Janelle stared at it in disbelief. How did you... I've had it for years, Delaney admitted. Elijah gave it to me the day before the test flight. He said if anything happened to him, I should keep it safe until someone came looking for the truth. He pushed the notebook toward her. I was a coward for not coming forward sooner, but maybe this can help make amends. The last few pages, they're what Preston has always been afraid of. With trembling hands, Janelle opened the notebook to the final entries. There, in her father's handwriting, was a detailed account of his conversations with Preston in the days before the crash, including Preston's insistence that the safety override be removed despite Elijah's protests. But more damning was the final page, a signed statement from Elijah Carter stating that if he died during the upcoming test, it would be because his safety concerns had been deliberately ignored for financial gain. He knew, Janelle whispered, tears welling in her eyes. He knew they were setting him up to fail. Delaney nodded sadly. He knew, but he flew anyway. That was Elijah. Always believed he could overcome any challenge, fix any problem. He never walked away from a fight. Janelle smiled through her tears. That sounds familiar. As Delaney rose to leave, he paused at the door. Your father would be proud of you, Janelle. Not just for exposing the truth, but for becoming the kind of engineer he always wanted to be, one who puts safety and integrity above all else. After he left, Janelle sat alone with her father's notebook, reading his final thoughts, connecting with his brilliant mind across the years that had separated them. In those pages, she found not just evidence, but closure, and a roadmap for the future. 6 months after Preston's disappearance, the Ether Dynamics hangar buzzed with a different kind of energy. Gone was the cutthroat competition and secrecy that had defined the Preston era. In its place was an atmosphere of collaborative innovation and purpose. At the center of it all stood Janelle, now officially heading the Skyhawk redesign initiative. With Dr. Morrow's full backing, she had assembled a small, dedicated team to rebuild the aircraft according to her father's original specifications, with all safety systems intact and his name prominently featured in the documentation. "Pass. Me that torque wrench," Janelle called to Sahana, who had become her right hand in the rebuilding effort. Around them, a team of engineers, some veterans, others fresh recruits drawn by the chance to work on Elijah Carter's visionary designs, worked with focused enthusiasm. The prototype taking shape before them looked similar to the Skyhawk X externally, but its internal systems had been completely reimagined. Gone were the compromised elements that prioritized performance over safety. In their place was Elijah's original vision, a perfect balance of innovation and protection. Dr. Morrow entered the hangar, accompanied by members of the board. Unlike Preston's showy demonstrations, these visits had become regular low-key affairs, genuine progress checks rather than performances. "How's it coming along?" Morrow asked, her eyes taking in the progress with genuine interest. "We're on schedule," Janelle replied. "The propulsion system is fully integrated, and we've successfully tested the auxiliary power grid. Most importantly, the triple redundant safety override is functioning exactly as my father designed it." One of the board members, an older woman who had often clashed with Preston, stepped forward. "The board has been discussing the company's future in light of recent events. We believe a fresh start is in order." Janelle nodded, assuming they meant a new marketing campaign, or perhaps a restructuring. "Effective next quarter," the board member continued. "Ether Dynamics will be rebranded as Carter Aerospace Technologies in honor of Dr. Elijah Carter's contributions to the industry." The hangar fell silent. Janelle stared at the board member, certain she had misheard. "You're naming the company after my father?" Dr. Morrow smiled. "It's long overdue. Elijah's vision is the foundation of our best technology. It's time the world recognized that." Tears welled in Janelle's eyes before she could stop them. Around her, the engineering team broke into spontaneous applause, none more enthusiastic than Harlan Tate, who had become one of her strongest advocates since his confession. Later that day, as news of the rebranding spread through the company and the industry, Janelle received word that Preston Maddox had been located in Singapore and was being extradited to face charges of corporate fraud, intellectual property theft, and negligent homicide. The trial became a media sensation. Day after day, the courtroom filled with journalists, industry insiders, and members of the public, captivated by the story of stolen genius and long-delayed justice. Harlan testified, visibly aged by the strain of finally speaking the truth. So did multiple whistleblowers, each sharing pieces of the pattern of deception and safety compromises that had defined Preston's leadership. On the third day of proceedings, Janelle was called to the stand. Walking to the witness box, she felt the weight of 18 years of questions, of grief, of searching. She was no longer the outsider in worn overalls who had entered Ether Dynamics on a dare. Now she was the engineer leading the rebirth of her father's legacy. "Ms. Carter," the prosecutor began, "could you describe for the court your father's reputation in the aerospace engineering community?" Janelle spoke clearly, her voice steady. "My father was known for two things: his brilliant innovations in propulsion technology and his unwavering commitment to safety. He believed the two were inseparable, that true innovation protected lives rather than risking them. And based on your expertise and the evidence you've discovered, what happened to compromise those principles in his final project?" His safety override system was deliberately removed against his explicit warnings. The documentation we've recovered shows that Preston Maddox ordered this modification to showcase performance capabilities to investors, despite being informed of the catastrophic risks. Preston, sitting at the defense table in an immaculate suit that couldn't hide his diminished presence, stared at her with cold hatred. As questioning continued, Janelle maintained her composure, explaining complex technical concepts in terms the jury could understand. She didn't allow emotion to color her testimony, letting the facts speak for themselves. Then came the surprise that shifted the entire trial. Janelle's legal team submitted a piece of evidence that hadn't been previously disclosed, an old audio recording found in her father's tape recorder during the cleanup of his workshop. The courtroom fell silent as Elijah Carter's voice filled the room, captured in a conversation from 18 years ago. "I'm recording this because I need a record. Preston, you're asking me to remove a critical safety system for a demonstration flight. I've explained the risks, and I'm documenting that you're overruling my objections despite being informed that this modification creates an unacceptable safety hazard." Preston's younger voice responded, "The override makes the system look sluggish. To investors, we need to show the full performance envelope. You're being paranoid, Elijah. This is why you're still just an engineer while I'm moving into management. Sometimes you have to take calculated risks." "There's nothing calculated about this," Elijah countered. "It's reckless. If anything happens during that flight—" "Nothing will happen," Preston interrupted. "And if it does, well, that's why we have insurance." The recording ended. The courtroom remained silent for several long seconds before erupting in murmurs. The judge called for order, but the damage was done. Preston's face had gone ashen. When the verdict came 3 weeks later, it surprised no one. Preston Maddox was found guilty on all counts and sentenced to 35 years in federal prison. As the judge announced the sentence, Janelle sat perfectly still, her expression unchanged. This wasn't a moment for celebration or vindication, only for quiet. Acknowledgement that justice, though delayed, had finally arrived. "Justice," she whispered to herself as Preston was led away in handcuffs. In the months that followed, Carter Aerospace Technologies rose from the ashes of scandal to become a symbol of innovation with integrity. The newly rebuilt aircraft, now officially named Elijah 1, was prepped for its inaugural test flight on what would have been Elijah Carter's 60th birthday. The morning of the flight, Janelle surprised everyone with an announcement. Standing before the assembled engineers, investors, and media representatives, she revealed her decision. "As the head of this project, I've overseen every detail of the Elijah 1's reconstruction," she began. "I know this aircraft inside and out. Every system, every safety protocol, every contingency, which is why I will be serving as test pilot for today's flight." A murmur ran through the crowd. Dr. Morrow stepped forward. "Janelle, are you certain? We have qualified test pilots available." Janelle nodded, her decision unmovable. "This aircraft represents my father's vision and my own engineering expertise. There's no one better qualified to demonstrate its capabilities and safety features." As she walked toward the locker room to change, Liam caught up with her. Their relationship had been strained since their argument months earlier, but professional. Respect had never wavered. "You never mentioned you were a pilot," he said, falling into step beside her. "There's a lot I never mentioned," Janelle replied. "I got my license at 19, did advanced training at 22. It was my way of connecting with him after he died, understanding what he experienced." Liam hesitated, then said what he'd been holding back. "I'm leaving next month. Accepted a position with an NGO developing humanitarian drone systems in conflict zones." Janelle stopped walking, genuinely surprised. "That's a big change." "I learned something important from you," Liam admitted. "Engineering isn't just about building impressive things. It's about making a difference, saving lives." For the first time in months, the tension between them dissolved. Janelle offered her hand. "They're lucky to have you." Liam took it, then surprised her with a quick hug. "Fly safe up there." An hour later, Janelle sat in the cockpit of the Elijah 1, running through pre-flight checks with methodical precision. The flight suit fit her perfectly, the helmet a comfortable weight. Through the canopy, she could see the crowd gathered. At a safe distance, colleagues, reporters, industry representatives, all watching with anticipation. "Control, this is Elijah 1, she spoke into her headset. "All systems nominal, request clearance for takeoff." "Elijah 1, this is Control," came Sahana's voice. "You are cleared for takeoff. Godspeed, Janelle." The engines hummed to life, not with the aggressive roar of the Skyhawk X, but with a confident, steady power that spoke of precise engineering and balanced design. As Janelle guided the aircraft down the runway, she felt a presence beside her in the cockpit. Not a ghost, but a legacy made tangible through steel and circuitry. "Let's show them what you built, Dad," she whispered, as the Elijah 1 lifted gracefully into the clear blue sky. The test flight was flawless. For 45 minutes, Janelle put the aircraft through a carefully planned series of maneuvers, demonstrating not just its performance capabilities, but its responsiveness and stability. The hybrid propulsion system, Elijah's most revolutionary concept, performed exactly as the simulations had predicted, delivering exceptional thrust with minimal fuel consumption and a dramatically reduced heat signature. Across the nation, the flight was being live-streamed. In schools, young black girls watched wide-eyed as Janelle Carter, engineer, pilot, daughter, soared through the sky in an aircraft of her own making. In universities, engineering students analyzed the revolutionary technology being demonstrated. In corporate boardrooms, executives reconsidered what was possible when innovation was paired with integrity. When Janelle finally brought the Elijah 1 in for a perfect landing, the applause was deafening. As she climbed down from the cockpit, cameras flashed and reporters called questions. But it was a small group of children, participants in a STEM education program invited to witness the historic flight, who captured her attention. A young, black girl no more than 12, pushed forward through the crowd, a notebook clutched in her hands. "Miss Carter, was it scary up there?" Janelle knelt to meet the girl at eye level, remembering herself at that age, sitting on her father's lap as he explained how engines worked. Not scary, exciting. The sky belongs to dreamers just as much as anyone else. The girl nodded solemnly. "I want to build planes too. My science teacher says girls don't become engineers, but I told him you did." Janelle's expression softened. "What's your name?" "Zoe." "Well, Zoe, you tell your teacher that Janelle Carter says he's wrong. The future of flight needs your dreams." She gestured to the aircraft behind her. "Never let anyone steal your fire." As the crowd dispersed and the technical teams began their post-flight analyses, Janelle found a quiet moment alone beside the Elijah 1. She ran her hand along the smooth fuselage, feeling the culmination of 2 generations of Carter innovation beneath her fingertips. "We flew, Dad," she whispered. "Together." 1 year after the successful test flight of the Elijah 1, Carter Aerospace Technologies hosted a gala celebration unlike anything the industry had seen before. The company's main lobby had been transformed for the launch of the Elijah Carter Fellowship, a new initiative to fund engineering education for underrepresented youth. The room buzzed with conversation as aerospace executives mingled with educators, current Carter engineers, and most importantly, the first class of fellowship recipients. 20 brilliant young minds from backgrounds traditionally underrepresented in STEM fields. Janelle stood at the podium, dressed not in flight gear or work clothes, but in an elegant pantsuit that managed to be both professional and a statement. The crowd quieted as she began to speak. 18 months ago, I walked into this building looking for a temp mechanic job, she began, eliciting knowing smiles from those familiar with her story. I was judged instantly, not for my skills or knowledge, but for how I looked, where I came from, what I represented. She paused, her eyes finding the young fellowship recipients in the front row. That judgment was nothing new. My father faced it decades ago as a brilliant black engineer, in an industry that wasn't ready to see past the color of his skin to the genius of his mind. But he persisted. He built anyway. He dreamed anyway. Janelle gestured to the large display behind her, showing the first graduating class of the fellowship program. Diverse young faces full of promise and determination. The Elijah Carter Fellowship isn't just about funding education. It's about changing the very nature of who gets to innovate, who gets to dream, who gets to build the future. It's about ensuring that no brilliant mind is overlooked because they don't fit someone's narrow idea of what an engineer looks like. The applause was heartfelt and sustained. As Janelle stepped away from the podium, Dr. Morrow approached with a surprising proposal. "The board meeting went well yesterday," she said quietly. They've unanimously approved offering you the position of Chief Innovation Officer. Janelle raised an eyebrow. That's unexpected. Is it? You've revolutionized our approach to design, established new safety protocols that are becoming industry standards, and your name carries weight that we desperately need. Morrow smiled. Plus, you're a damn good engineer. Janelle considered. The offer, watching the fellowship recipients excitedly discussing their projects with industry veterans who, not long ago, might have dismissed them without a second thought. I appreciate the offer, she said finally, but I'd like to propose an alternative. I want to head a new division, the Carter Mentorship Program. We'd work directly with engineering students, recent graduates, and career changers from underrepresented backgrounds. Morrow studied her thoughtfully. Instead of being in the executive suite, you want to be in the trenches, shaping the next generation? That's where I belong, Janelle confirmed. My father was a great engineer, but his greatest gift to me wasn't his designs. It was the time he spent teaching me, showing me how to see the world through an engineer's eyes. Later that evening, as the event wound down, Janelle found herself in conversation with Liam, who had returned for the celebration. His year working on humanitarian drone systems had changed him. His skin was tanned, his formerly neat appearance now more rugged, but his eyes held the same intelligence and humor. The mentorship program is perfect for you, he said, genuine admiration in his voice. You're a natural teacher. And you? How's saving the world going? Janelle asked with a smile. One drone delivery at a time, Liam replied. It's challenging work, but when you see medical supplies reach a village that's been cut off by conflict, he shrugged. Makes all those late nights worth it. Their conversation was interrupted by Sahana, now lead engineer for Carter's next generation projects. Sorry to interrupt the reunion, but there's someone you need to meet, Janelle. She introduced a young engineer who had recently joined the company, bright, eager, and clearly in awe of Janelle. After a brief conversation about the young woman's ideas for improving fuel efficiency, Sahana pulled Janelle aside. She reminds me of someone, Sahana said with a knowing smile. A few years ago, I would have been too intimidated to speak up in meetings or suggest improvements to senior engineers' designs. Watching you stand your ground changed that for me. Janelle squeezed her friend's shoulder. You always had it in. You just needed to see it was possible. The following morning, Janelle visited a local middle school STEM program where she'd been invited to speak. The classroom was filled with curious faces, many from backgrounds similar to her own. At the back of the room sat a young black girl with serious eyes and a sketch pad full of aircraft drawings. After her presentation, Janelle made her way to the girl's desk. May I see what you're working on? The girl hesitantly turned her sketch pad around, revealing detailed drawings of aircraft with innovative wing designs and carefully noted specifications. These are impressive, Janelle said, genuinely moved by the child's talent and attention to detail. You've really thought about airflow dynamics here. My dad says I'm silly for drawing planes all the time, the girl admitted. He says it's not what girls do. Janelle knelt beside the desk, meeting the girl's eyes. My dad told me I could build anything I could imagine. And he was right. Reaching into her bag, Janelle pulled out a small pin, a pair of stylized wings with Janelle, Carter Future Flyer engraved beneath. I've been saving this for someone special, she said, handing it to the girl. Someone who sees the sky as a beginning, not a limit. The girl's eyes widened as she carefully took the pin. This is the first one ever? The very first, Janelle confirmed, blinking back unexpected tears. Wear it proudly. That afternoon, Janelle returned to her office to find a package waiting on her desk. The return address was unfamiliar, but the handwriting on the label brought an immediate lump to her throat. It matched the handwriting in her father's notebooks. With trembling fingers, she opened the package to find a sealed envelope with "For Janelle" written across the front, and a note explaining that the letter had been found in an old storage crate during the clearance of a defunct aerospace facility. Janelle opened the envelope carefully, as if it might dissolve at her touch. Inside was a letter from her father, dated 3 days before his fatal flight. My dearest Janelle, if you're reading this, something has gone wrong. I pray that's not the case, but engineers plan for contingencies, so here we are. I've enclosed a photo of us from last summer. You sitting in the cockpit of that old Cessna, pretending to fly while I explained the controls. The joy on your face. That day is what I think of whenever I doubt my path. You asked me yesterday why I build things that fly. I told you it's because the sky is the greatest challenge. But the truth is simpler. I build because you're watching. Because someday, you'll build too. Maybe airplanes. Maybe something else entirely. What matters is that you'll know it's possible. Some people won't want you to succeed. They'll see your brilliance as a threat. Never let that stop you. Build. Anyway. Dream anyway. Fly anyway. This design I'm testing tomorrow, it's revolutionary, Nell. It will change everything if it works. And someday, perhaps you'll take it further than I ever could. For when you build your own wings, Dad enclosed was a faded photograph. 11-year-old Janelle in the cockpit of a small plane. Her father leaning in beside her. Both beaming with identical smiles of wonder and possibility. Janelle held the photo to her heart. 18 years of grief and purpose crystallizing into a moment of perfect clarity. The letter wasn't just a goodbye, it was a handoff, a passing of the torch from one generation of innovation to the next. Months later, as Janelle watched a new class of mentees working on their first design project, she found herself sketching an idea that had been forming in her mind, an interatmospheric shuttle based on her father's propulsion concepts, but capable of reaching the edge of space. A true bridge between worlds. Time to go higher, she whispered to herself, adding details to the preliminary design. From her office window, she could see the Elijah 1 in the testing field, being prepped for another demonstration flight. The aircraft that had once represented stolen legacy now stood as a testament to persistence, to justice, to the power of truth to eventually break through even the most carefully constructed deceptions. Janelle watched the sunset glint off its wings. From the observation deck, her eyes sparkling not with the pain and determination that had driven her for so many years, but with something new, hope for a future where innovation served humanity rather than ego, where brilliance was recognized regardless of its packaging. In the lobby below, visitors paused before a newly installed mural, Elijah and Janelle Carter, standing side by side, blueprints in hand, the past and future of aerospace innovation united in a single image of possibility. Beneath it, words that had become the company's new motto, a simple but powerful declaration of purpose. We build, for those who dared to dream. As the sun sank below the horizon casting a golden glow across the airfield, Janelle Carter, engineer, pilot, mentor, daughter, turned back to her designs, adding her own innovations to her father's legacy, extending the journey they had begun, together. The cycle complete. The future waiting. What would you risk to claim a legacy that was stolen from you? Janelle's journey reminds us that justice demands courage, even when standing alone. Like, share, and subscribe for more stories of underdogs who refuse to let their brilliance be buried.